Today on T30, my guest is a former friend and colleague, B. Davis. We hadn't seen each other for almost 17 years. But when I saw her announcement on Facebook that she was now identifying as trans, she formerly identified as male, I immediately reached out and asked her to join me on the program. During our chat, we discussed some of the most controversial aspects of trans ideology and gender dysphoria. We talked about Dee's divorce, the severe mental trauma that followed, her attempted suicide, and her eventual healing. We then discussed the hotly debated topic of children on puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones, trans females competing against natal females in competitive sports, and why the historic meaning of gender has meaning and purpose, and how best to explore the idea of gender fluidity as a collective culture. B and I didn't agree on everything, but we thoroughly enjoyed each other's time, and both felt lucky to be back in touch. I hope you learned as much as I did, and we welcome any and all questions on our Substack page. Cheers. Okay, now that's our legal warning, my friend. We are on camera now. I just want to make sure, because you look fabulous, and I was hoping you'd dress up. And you did.
Yes, of course.
That's so great. You do. I mean, seriously, look amazing. I saw you on Facebook, obviously, and I wasn't sure who you were. So, because we haven't, I guess to catch up my listeners, we have not hung out since 2006. That's when we worked together at Questus.
It's like what? Yeah.
15, 16 years.
Even probably longer than that, maybe even 2005.
Okay. Because I think we brought you in on the Verizon business to help us out.
Right.
So that was 2005 when we closed that. Yeah, that's hilarious. So, yes, thank you.
Wait, are we live? Or is this live? Or are you recording this, going to edit it? Or what's going on?
We're recording it. We're going to edit. So anything you want to edit out, if you say something, you got the 5-minute fuck up rule, just let me know. We're all good. But what I wanted to do was just capture everything, because we haven't caught up for 16 years. And so when I saw you on Facebook, I saw B. Davis, and I was like, I don't recognize this person, because I recognized your face, but then the makeup and the beautiful Gucci stuff, and I was like, yeah. And I love Gucci. So I was like, I love this. So, but then I looked at all of our mutual friends, and I was like, oh my God, okay. I know this person. So that's kind of where it all took place for me, as far as, and then I looked up, and then I started looking at your feed, and I started, kind of going all the way back. And that may be a good place for us to dive in, because it's been one of those things where, hold on a sec. I did a little bit of homework on you, because I hadn't seen you for so long. And I looked up all your old Axios 88 stuff and all the great work you guys were doing as a full stack developer. Kudos on that.
Thank you.
And I went to Crunchbase, and I saw all of your accolades there. And by the way, you're still identifying as male, as a gender. So I want to bring that to your attention.
On Crunchbase?
Yes. So I just want to make sure you know that, so you can ready that at any point. And so I guess my question would be, when did this all happen? When did you find yourself, and when did you start expressing yourself at this level?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome.
As I said to you, it's all very new. I'll put it that way. But I'll start back 2020. My mom passed away in a car accident.
Sorry to hear that. That's terrible.
And I think that was a little bit of a wake-up call, because our family is blessed with a lot of long life. My grandmother didn't die until she was almost 100 years old. And so I just have this embedded idea that mom would be around forever. And I'll take care of her, and she would get old, and she would complain about her body, this, that, or the other. Then, something would happen. Like, my grandmother was gone, she had a stroke. And then I think she was so stubborn, she waited for the priest to give her final rites, because my family's Catholic. And then she decided that she was ready to die. Good
for her.
It was natural that I thought my mom was going to be the same way. And then, this freak accident happened. Literally a day before I was supposed to give my final presentation at Brown for my master's thesis. And
congrats on that, by the way. I did see that as well. So I know you went and went to Brown and just completed that. So that's awesome and not shocking knowing how smart you are. So congrats.
Thank you. So then I had to fly to another country because she had actually was in Trinidad, where my family's from, attending my aunt's wedding because my aunt got remarried at 60 and just, fell in love like later in life. And so she had made her wedding dress and all of this. And then, she died in a car accident. So I was just kind of like in absolute shock. She was everything for me. She was my protector, my teacher. She operated as kind of like both parents in a lot of different ways. She never had a relationship in her life. She focused all her energy on me. I never had to deal with men coming and going out of our household. My dad was completely out of the picture. I've only seen him like physically, like maybe 3 times my whole entire life. And so when that happened, then I just really had to take stock of like what I was doing, like this idea that I have my whole entire life to figure things out. And there were a lot of feelings that were suppressed since childhood that I was dealing with. And it was really confusing because a lot of it didn't make sense because I didn't have the language to speak about it, because in all of this, my sexuality hasn't changed. So some people in the community, in the LGBT community, were considering me straight because I've never been with a man. I have no desire to be with men. And I think that's a really good conversation to have, because dressing like this doesn't mean that I want someone's penis. Right. I think that for a lot of women, it also means the same thing. They're not dressing in any certain way because they want men. And some are, but a lot of them aren't. And that's a really interesting conversation, because the conversation that I had with my ex, my now ex, was, whose attention are you trying to get? I'm like, no one's. I mean, yours, but but my own gaze is what I'm interested in, and to be able to look in the mirror and say that, I love myself. And so in 2021, I came out to my then spouse and was like, hey, and I hadn't told anyone, not even my closest friends. Decided that I really wanted to talk to her first and say, listen, my gender identity is something that I'm interested in exploring. And then the first thing she asked me was, do you watch gay porn?
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was like, no, this is not a conversation about sexuality. I think where my sexuality stands. I mean, from our, interaction. Yeah. But it just goes to show, like, for me, how very toxic, even known for someone for 12 years and, made love to them for 12 years. And this idea that if someone says to you, hey, listen, I want to talk to you about my gender identity, that the first thing that their mind goes to is sex. And I think that's the part that, for me, is almost like a personal mission. It's like to let people know, like, hey, listen, you can adorn yourself, because I feel like there really is, there's a history of people adorning themselves. Everything has to do with wigs and makeup and high heels, and everything that you think is feminine was actually created for men, by men. Sorry, someone's at my door. Can we pause for 1 second?
Yeah, sure. No problem. Well, FedEx needs to do their job too.
Right. So for 1 year, we had a lot of counseling, a lot of kind of like ups and downs, a whole lot of, crying, therapy, discussions, arguments about this. And, it's also, I don't dress like this every single day. It's kind of like something where if I feel, I just give myself the freedom to do as much as I want to in any particular day. Some days I wake up and, I have blue hair underneath this. And so I just like, put a little concealer on and then I'm out the door. I don't wear a lot of dresses. This is kind of like, I usually don't wear a dress because I don't feel comfortable in a dress. I usually just wear pants. But it's something where I really felt like the box that I was in was overwhelming for me. And that kind of speaks to the fact that I don't have any really good male friends, other than I can count on two fingers. I just don't connect with male energy. Most of my friends are women. And I'm not saying friends, I mean really good friends.
Yeah.
And more so these days, most of my friends are lesbian women. It's just something where when I'm in a big group of men, I just don't feel comfortable. I've gone to some bachelor parties, and I'm just kind of disgusted by the conversation. It doesn't connect with me at all, and I just feel out of place. And I think that my gender identity is at play there as well. So,
well, I think that's great. And I'm proud of you and I'm happy for you, because I can't imagine how hard that must be to live your whole life with that kind of tucked away and not being able to deal with it. So, I mean, you're brave, and I commend that. I think that's cool. Some of the things I wanted to bring up to you specific to your posts, and this is kind of where I was trying to do a little homework and our reporting. And I should probably preface it this way. As I mentioned briefly, T30 is a journalistic organization that I started with some media buddies. And the hope is to report on things in the news media that are dividing our culture. So defund the police and critical race theory have been huge topics that we've dove into over the last 7 or 8 months. And then gender ideology and gender dysphoria is something we're focusing on now. And so as of right now, I've interviewed a couple clinicians, researchers in the UK, Australia. Last week, I actually interviewed Helen Joyce, who wrote a book called Trans, When Ideology Meets Reality. And next week, I'm interviewing Julie Bindel, who wrote a book called Feminism for Women. And I'm interviewing an acquaintance in the media industry whose child is going through transition currently. And it was a biological boy who has been transitioning to a little girl, and she's adorable, and he's shared pictures with me. And now the parents are kind of in this really unenviable position of talking about puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and all of that. And so when I saw you talking about specifically gender and trans, and that trans is here, bitches, let's talk about it, that kind of thing, I was like, oh, okay, perfect. And so one of the things you posted on the 25th, and that's kind of what you mentioned, it was in June, is when I wanted to notice the posts starting to identify who you are. And your new expression was a trans woman going outside and living her truth unapologetically, knowing the harm she can face simply for existing is a protest on its own. That was one thing you shared. Another was bisexuals in a committed and monogamous relationship have not chosen a side, they have chosen a person. And then I thought this one was really cute. It said, "You've changed." And it said, "You're supposed to." Another one there. Yeah. And then December 21st, you said, now you have so many questions. Come see me on the 15th and get the real tea. And so you're doing a drag queen show, correct?
Yeah.
In Sacramento. I have to come and see that one of these days.
Yes, for sure. Okay, so drag was the first thing that allowed me to have permission to do what I wanted to do. It is so incredibly hard for a man to put this on and to go out into the public world.
Oh yeah, I bet.
It takes a lot of guts, a lot of self-reflection. I mean, it is the scariest thing that I ever did in my whole entire life. And I think that when I have a history of when stuff scares the hell out of me, then I go towards that thing.
That's a good thing to do.
Yeah, I think because I know on the other side of that fear, there's something amazing. And so drag was one of those things where I'm like, okay, I'm going to look horrible. I'm going to look like a boy in a wig, and I'm just going to deal with it. And when I first, got made up and I put a wig on and this kind of other stuff like that, I hated it. It looked terrible. people who are around me, it's like, oh my God, you look gorgeous. I'm like, nope, I don't like it. I tried again. I was like, oh, you know, this looks a little better. And then maybe like the third time, and I would not go out in public like that. I would just like basically go to my office and then take it all off. The third time I saw my mom and I cried because I connected with a very familiar feminine energy that was inside of me. Mm-hmm. And I saw her face when she was young, and I saw my daughter's face as well. And I was like, there she is. And people were like, there she is. And people saw the smile on my face and just like this light that came up out of me. And I felt like a whole person. I just felt like myself for once in my life. And I still hadn't gone anywhere. The first time that I went out in drag, and going out in drag is different than going out like this. Like this, I wouldn't consider drag, because drag is like pink hair and like crazy. Like,
really
this, and like, you know, like drag is like a costume. This is just like a gender expression. The first time I went out in drag, you know, the first thing that happened is like some guy, you know, just started like, you know, catcalling me. And I felt so vulnerable. Like this idea of being these teetery little, you know, high heels and this little dress and like, you know, like if like nails. And I was like, if shit goes down, I can't protect myself. Like, what am I going to do? It was just the most frightening experience in my whole entire life. And it took me a while to get used to it, because it just takes a while to get used to experiencing life as a woman. And because that's what's happening. And I think that even if it's temporary, like there's shows like We're Here. I'm not sure if you've heard of that show before. It's on HBO Max. Bob the drag queen, Shangela, and Eureka, they're three drag queens that kind of go around middle America, get people to get into drag as a way of transforming their mind.
Okay.
Men should do it. You should know what it feels like to walk in heels, and like you're trying to, like, you know, someone's trying to walk ahead of you and you're like, would you please slow down because of these heels? You know, why are you taking so long to get ready? Well, because like I'm doing all this stuff. Like, I think that men, cisgender men, straight men would have a lot more compassion. Just one time, like getting yourself ready, like women have to get themselves ready and going out and experiencing what it feels like to be looked at up and down and sideways and around, how it feels to be examined in that way. It will give you a whole new perspective.
Yeah, I would agree to that. I would say that a lot of the feminists that I've talked to would agree with everything you just said there. One of the big pieces specific, and we can get into this later, but one of the ideas around feminism in general, and they actually came up with the word gender as a group in the 70s and 60s, 70s, in that area. And it was to delineate the differences between males and females, specifically around that. So my brother asked me this 20 years ago. My brother's an advocate for women. He's a divorce attorney who deals with domestic violence and all the icky stuff. And he asked me a long time ago, have you ever been scared walking your car? And I said, what do you mean? Like, did someone key it?
Right.
And he's like, I genuinely didn't understand the question.
Right.
And he said, no, have you been scared to be attacked? And I said, no, never. I mean, I've never thought of that.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, so just understand this. All women are scared all the time when they're alone. And I was like, wow. And so that helped. And to your point, I think it is a good thing to experience anything opposite, because it does put you into a new camp. You have a different purview. You have more empathy. It's just one of those things that I think is fantastic. So when you actually started, and I don't know if you want to talk about this, are you divorced?
Separated.
Okay. And is that something that is irreconcilable because of this? Or is that something that you think you can actually gel back together with time and therapy?
The plan was for us to be together. I think that the way that everything happened, I don't think it's reconcilable now. I mean,
okay.
She told me that she was a supporter me and this transition. I told her in the beginning, I was like, listen, this is something that you don't have to accept. Like, we can definitely like split as friends, and if you don't want to be a part of this and all of that. And she said, no, I love you, and I'm here for you, and that kind of thing. And what I realized in the end is that was a complete lie. So I think that there are couples that deal with this and they get through it. There are couples that deal with this and they don't get through it. And there's couples that deal with this and they have like a train wreck. And I think I thought to myself, like, I don't want to have the train wreck, but the person that I was dealing with was unfortunately a liar and a cheater. And at the end of the day, she ended up, being a cheater as well. And that was painful. So painful, actually, because I did have surgery. So I had surgery on my face. A lot of people can't tell. On my nose and on my hairline, and that was it. I didn't have the facial, the jaw realignment or anything like that, or any fillers done to my face. But during my surgery is when she decided to go off with somebody else. And I was on, and I only tell this part of it because I think it's really important. I was on a lot of painkillers at the time because of the surgery. I was getting back onto hormones because at the time I thought that I wanted to be on hormones just to see what it felt like.
So to be on estrogen, like cross-sex hormones.
Estrogen. Yeah. Okay. So I gotten back onto hormones because you can't have them before your surgery. You can only have them afterwards. And then, I had, round-the-clock pain medicine, and then also had my cannabis gummies because something to like. So while all of this was happening, this is when I began to find these text messages, and so that sent me into a spiral of pain and anguish. And I say this because at this moment, especially after the first surgery, a lot of trans people commit suicide.
Yes.
They feel regret of what they just did. They feel like, maybe that they've made a mistake. If they don't have the proper support, then a lot of people will either attempt suicide or, take their own lives. And I was one of those people.
You were suicidal.
I know. I tried to kill myself.
Wow.
Yeah, I tried to kill myself. I had overdosed, well, not kind of overdosed, but taken a lot of cannabis gummies. I had a psychotic. This is after I had found out of, what she did, and I sliced open my arm, and I was going to bleed out on my bed, and
wow, friend.
I had a friend that called the police, and the police came and got me, and it's been a long road to recovery. And after that, I didn't want to see a wig. I didn't want to see in women's clothes. I was completely ashamed of myself and who I was. And it took a lot. It took a lot of friends in the queer community. It took a lot of therapy, but to slowly build myself back up to where I'm at right now, which I could still say that because that was just in February
of this year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
well, I'm sorry to hear that, friend. And so what took place? Your friend called the police, and did they take you into the hospital? And then from what took place after that? So
they called the police. The police came in. They took me to the hospital. I spent 72 hours. I spent 31 hours in the hallway of an emergency room on a bed, like literally. They took me from there to a psychiatric facility where I spent more time just basically, I was basically like locked up. There was no counseling. They would wake me up in the middle of the night, shove pills down my throat. It was like worse than anything you'd seen on TV, like honestly. Yeah.
I'm sorry, that makes it worse. And so at that point, you're now in psychiatric care.
Right.
It doesn't sound like they cared in this case.
No, not at all.
And
Worst place for anyone to be. Like, I don't care what your mental state is, it makes it worse. Yeah.
yeah, no. And when were you released from the psychiatric care?
So they can only hold you for 72 hours. So
Is that like a 5150 kind of thing? Where they're
50,
yeah, scared that you're going to take your own life. Got it. Okay.
Right. So I quickly got my right sense of mind. It's like, I need to get out of here, and I need to get my head back in the game so that I can show them that I'm ready to get out, because I need to get real help, not help inside here. Right. And, I have 3 kids, but 2 of my sons flew in from different parts of the country, one from LA, one from Michigan, and they were there for me to be there with me. And, from the beginning, when I announced this to my kids, my family, my whole entire family has been completely supportive. And this is a Catholic, West Indian, Caribbean family, usually known for being very, very traditional, this kind of thing. They all embrace me. They all call me B. They don't call me Brian. Okay. Not that it really matters to me. Actually, I'm gender fluid. So, okay. What are your pronouns? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, I'm actually the rare exception that I use all the pronouns. So don't judge the whole pronoun thing on me, because I'm a rare Pokemon. I'm not only queer, but I'm also only attracted to women. So, and I'm also gender fluid. So, I represent kind of like a divergence even in my own community. So anyway, after, getting out of the hospital and all of that, then it was really about just kind of like trying to figure out what was going on with my relationship, which I realized that, in a lot of different ways, it was completely over. And that was a hard pill to swallow, because now my worst nightmare has come true, is that I've lost the person that I really, really loved because of expressing who I am. And that was very, very painful, because because what you internalize is that it's your fault. And then what I had to relearn is that it was always okay for me to be myself. And the fact that, all the lying that she did, that was something that's her problem. Mm-hmm. And then, my whole fear was that no one's going to think I'm attractive, and I'm going to be by myself for the rest of my life. And I really need companionship. So what am I going to do now? And all of that. And I was completely wrong. There are tons of really hot women that think that I'm attractive.
Well, that's great. And
I didn't know, I had no idea. I was like, men want women, and women want men, and women who like women want women. Who's going to want, right. This, apparently there are some people.
Well, that's one thing. Again, I've only been studying this for about 5 or 6 months. The one thing I do know from my own homework, however, is that there are so many examples of what you're talking about, specific to gender neutral love relationships. They have nothing to do with each other. Have you seen the show Euphoria?
Yeah, I've haven't seen the whole thing, but I watched a few episodes, and it's really beautiful. I love Zendaya.
It is. And I'll say this to anyone who hasn't watched it, it's a show on Netflix, and it's about teenagers in high school. And my wife and I started watching it, and the relationship that actually taught me a ton, by the way, was between Jewel and what's her name? It's Zendaya's character. I can't remember her name now, but it's a female. Zendaya is the female. Jewel. Right? I can't remember her name. So Jewel is a transsexual or transgender in real life who started on puberty blockers and or cross-sex hormones at the age of 14. She's adorable and wonderful. And in the movie, she is also a teenage trans female. Mm-hmm. And so she has a friendship with this girl, her friend. They become really good friends. And during the first 6 or 7 episodes, they actually began a romantic relationship. Mm. And as I saw them kissing and being intimate with one another. I looked at my wife and I said, oh my God, I get it. I said, what? I said, they don't care about the parts. They don't care about the gender. They don't care about anything. They just love each other. And I was like, okay, I get it. I get it. And that was the first time it clicked for me, you know,
Right.
as a 55-year-old white male. I was like, all right, so, okay, I get it.
Once you see the examples of just genuine love between people,
Yeah.
and I don't care if you know, for me, it was when I saw, you know, a lesbian couple when, you know, back years and years ago, then you get it. And when you witness it kind of like in like what feels like close proximity, even if it's a TV show, then you understand that it's about just two people loving one another. And
Yeah.
I look forward to the day actually where gender is not even a thing, like where people don't have to label themselves anything. You know, you can just be anything you want to. You're a person. And if you want to adorn yourself with, you know, wigs and makeup or whatever, then you do it. It doesn't mean anything particular about your sexuality, about your intelligence, about who you love, about the way your voice should sound when it sounds. Like one thing that I refuse to do is to change my voice. My voice is my voice. I'm not going to start changing my voice because I have a very deep kind of like raspy voice. And, you know, I thought for a second that, you know, if I'm going to transition, what about my voice? But women love my voice. You know, I didn't know that either. So I'm not going to change anything that I don't want to change. The things that I do want to change, I will change. And that's it. And I think that's
still
fine for everyone, really.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Are you still on female hormones?
Oh, no, I stopped that.
Stop that.
I think that was me wanting to do that was kind of like an experimentation, really having to do with some of the toxic communication between me and my ex, where I think it's hard to say, but I think that part of her plan was to try to get me to transition as far as possible as to female as possible so that she could have a justification. Because really, you know, other than the hair and the makeup and a nose job, then I'm still me. I'm not going to have a Brazilian butt lift. I'm not going to get titties. I could show up as a boy anytime I wanted to. I could show up like this anytime I wanted to. And I think that's obviously in this case, I think for her, it's a little intimidating. And also I draw attention. So if I go anywhere, people are going to be like, you know, like this, and people will be like that. Some people will be like, oh my God, you know, and there are certain people that just don't want that type of attention. And I get that.
And that's good for you. I think that's, you know, an evolved way to look at it. I think that the next relationship you have that is open and honest, and this is all up in front, that's a very different thing. And I don't want to, you know, not judging your ex. I just know that would be difficult for a lot of relationships.
For anyone.
Yeah.
I think that the main problem for me is not with that part of it. It's just with the honesty. And I think that part is maybe also just a lesson of, you know, of life. And I mean, I can imagine, you know, it was also hard for her to say what she really felt, because then she was also losing her, because then she's like, okay, yeah, we'll go, fine. you know, because she's also losing a person that she hopefully loves a whole lot. I think that at the end of the day, just the way that everything went down at the very, very end, I think that she probably could have saved us both a lot of heartache. In those very last days of, you know, the cheating and all the other stuff like that, that didn't have to happen. I mean, even though a breakup probably would still have been, you know, imminent, that it didn't have to be that way, because that made me feel very betrayed, unloved, unattractive, like the small, you know, I don't, you know, people out there who have been cheated on, you know, all the emotions that come with that. So, but
yeah, that's understandable. And I think that part of, and again, I don't know her from anyone, and I just know that some of the stuff I've read is that spouses in general do not know how to react to this because it is completely foreign.
Right.
And because she loves you, she was probably concerned if she didn't say what she thought she should say,
Right.
it could cause you to do what you did, actually, that there's suicidal ideation involved, and that scared her. And right. So then she just acted out because that's what people do. And unfortunately, she acted out in ways that hurt you worse. And obviously she probably regrets that too. So yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, friend. That's all rough. Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
You identify as trans. And when I historically understood the word trans, I knew a transsexual man 16 years ago, who went through the whole surgery. Mm-hmm. So what they're called autogynephilia. This was a man who actually believed he was born in the wrong body, and he represented himself as female and went through the surgeries and was on cross-sex hormones. Mm-hmm. And so that was like traditional. Again, I shouldn't say it's what was my traditional understanding of what trans was. Mm-hmm. Trans itself is a much bigger word today, correct? It's when you say you're trans, and this is another thing too. I have a lot of friends that are into drag queen. They're all gay, and they all live here in San Francisco, and they go to really cool, I go to their stuff. I have one of my buddies in New York, Michael Salat, is a wonderful drag performer. And that I understand to be performance. And that I understand has nothing to do with sexuality. That's just expression. So what does trans mean to you? What does that word mean to you? And then how does it apply to you specifically?
Yeah. So transgender specifically means someone that crosses over gender. And you have to excuse me, I'm going to be really gay right now. I'm going to use my back on the fucking side here.
Okay.
So trans means someone who crosses gender. Okay.
Okay.
So if you think of gender as these little, I call them little prisons that we put ourselves in, these little blocks that we put ourselves in. Okay. Where male, female, this, that, or the other, then a trans person is going to cross over from where they've been categorized, whether it's been, because of their biology or whatever reason, into another gender. Okay. So there are trans people who have the desire to cross over from one little box, okay, male, for example, and to be passable in the other little box. So they don't even want you to know that they're trans. They're going, because of their personal choice or their dysphoria or whatever their reasons are, which are all valid, by the way, they're going to get rid of their facial hair. They're going to take hormones. They're going to, transform their bodies with surgery or whatever it is, so that you don't even know that if you walk down the street, you have no idea. And that makes them feel happy and fulfilled inside. Their voice, everything. Okay.
Yep.
Then there are trans people like me who really probably are more on the subcategory non-binary. Like, I don't want to be put in the binary being male, female. Okay.
Right.
So I refuse to shave my beard. Okay. I'll let it grow a little bit longer than this, but I'll kind of shave it down. I don't want to shave it all the way off because I don't like the way it makes my face look. Okay. But I still like to put my wigs on and my makeup and all other stuff like that. So people are obviously going to know that I'm not a woman. Okay. A cisgender woman, but that doesn't bother me. And my trans community accepts me and says, okay, you're my sister. So I don't separate myself from them, because I know there are other people who say, well, I'm not trans, I'm non-binary. That's your choice. But I identify with my trans sisters, whether they're male or female, whatever variation. So I would say it's my belief that trans encompasses is an umbrella for a lot of different expressions, put it that way.
Okay. And so it doesn't delineate from non-binary in your categorization then?
Not for me. No, there are also non-binary people who will be like, I'm not trans, I'm non-binary.
Which just means I don't want to identify as either gender.
Right.
Or any gender.
Doesn't want to have any gender associated with them, but also doesn't want to, but maybe also doesn't want to have the label trans put on them as well. Because trans definitely comes with a lot of stuff, as you said, before you had a friend, and, we had, terms like transsexual and transvestite and all these other things.
Right. That's another question, though. So transvestite was what I would have understood where you are today, because you are heterosexual, but enjoy wearing or expressing yourself, with different clothes. Is a transvestite not a term that you subscribe to? Or?
I don't like that term, actually.
Okay, yeah. Does it have a pejorative meaning to it in the community?
I think it definitely has. I think it feels like colored or Negro. Okay. It feels kind of a little bit outdated, and it has a lot of baggage to it.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair. Okay, that's cool. So what is there, and this is the thing too, is the big discussion specifically on the right, and I don't mean like crazy, mean-spirited people. I just mean people in general that are trying to figure out what gender means. Mm-hmm. So historically, as I mentioned earlier, the feminist literature that I've studied and some of the feminists that I've interviewed, they delineated it for specific reasons, one of which was female-only spaces. So rape clinics, domestic violence, female prisons, they wanted to make sure that they had that space because of the patriarchy in general being the biggest fear for a lot of these women, specifically in those spaces. Right. How do you square that? How do you look at that as a trans person who obviously has evolved into this position and this expression? What does that look like for you? What is that? Is there rules there that don't make sense? So a trans female is an example attending one of these female-only counseling sessions. How would you see that?
So the way that I look at this is I look at this through the lens of what happened to me when the first time that I went out dressed like this. And I was actually in more femme than what you see right here. It was like a long pink wig, and it was like a little mini dress. And it's like I was slayed to the gods, okay? And in Sacramento, there's this little area we call the Lavender District, where it's like a couple of gay clubs over there. But then it's like not even a full block, right? Because across the street, then there's a restaurant called Lowbrow that is not, part of it, I would say. Mm-hmm. And I can tell because when you go inside, Badlands and Faces and Depot, usually when you go to the bathroom, then the bathroom is all gender. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's not a sign on the door that says, male, female, because that doesn't make any sense in our community.
Right.
Because we're not categorizing ourselves like that.
Correct.
You go into Lowbrow, however, you still have male, female.
And what is Lowbrow?
Lowbrow.
Bar?
Yeah, it's a restaurant and a bar kind of, mixed together, right? So I need to go to the bathroom. I was at Lowbrow. I'm dressed like this. I walk up to the bathroom. And I'm like, what bathroom do I go in? If I go into the men's bathroom, they're going to look at me crazy. If I go into the women's bathroom, they're going to look at me crazy. I turned around and didn't go to the bathroom. Now, what is the admission ticket to get into the women's bathroom? The admission ticket is not what you have in between your legs, because no one's going to check that. The admission ticket is how feminine are you?
Yeah.
Okay. So
can you pass?
If you can pass being feminine, no one's going to ask you any questions. If you can't pass, then they won't. Okay. How does that feel for a lesbian woman who's dressed in, very masculine way, or she's dressed
or very butch,
very, very butch. I know a lot of lesbian friends that get questioned in the women's bathroom, and they're not trans; they're just women.
Right.
So I think this discussion about who gets to go to what thing based on female only, male only is a very complicated discussion. But it affects every single thing that we do, including going to the bathroom. I think that I don't have the answer to it to say, okay, well, it should be this way, it should be that way. I think that if you have a really specific, environment or community that you want to create for a very specific group of people, like trans people or cisgender white women or cisgender Black women or whoever, then create that space for them. However, if you create a space for women and it's not supposed to be specific to any type of woman or expression of womanhood, then you should expect people to show up from all spectrums of womanhood, including trans people, including people who are lesbian, including people who are non-binary, who may appear to be women. Because if you appear to be a woman, there's some man that's going to come at you.
Yeah.
I don't get that a lot because when I put my heels on, I'm probably like almost like 6'8", 6'9". There's not a lot of men that will step to me because they would have to step to me like this. Okay.
Yes.
So I don't get a lot of that attention. I get more attention from women that think that I'm gorgeous, but it's because I'm so big. And once they hear my voice, the men definitely, like my drag sister who's like this, she gets hit on all the time because she's attracted, and she's a gay man. So she's attracting that energy. But it all depends on, how you show up in the world, how people are reacting to you, and, for my brown trans sisters that are really tiny and pass and they're gorgeous, those are the ones that get murdered because they are smaller than a lot of the men that they're encountering. And the men that encounter them sometimes fetishize them and want to have sex with them, but then they don't want anyone to know. And so they kill them, which is a horrific thing to think about.
Yeah, that is. That is.
There's been so many Black trans women's bodies that have been found in dumpsters over the years. And it's because we are fetishized. But then after that, then we're disposable, I guess. But, So I also don't have the experience of being poor. I'm a relatively wealthy software engineer who doesn't, who has healthcare and is, as I said, 6'3" without the heels. But then after that, I have this presence. So a lot of the things, that's why I also need to be a voice for my community, because there's a lot of women, trans brown women, that don't have the privilege that I have of being who I am. So I have to speak out. That's one of the reasons I'm really happy that you invited me.
Well, no, and that's actually one of the reasons I genuinely want to understand this. And I think you know me well enough to know, obviously we've been hung out for many years, but I have compassion and empathy for anyone that is dealing with any of these issues specific to trans. And the discussions that I see specifically in the zeitgeist, the Don't Say Gay bill, we had reporters do an article on that. And we pointed out the lunacy of both parties and acting like neither had a case, right? So it's one of those things where when you look at trans people in general, the big discussion right now is children.
Children, yeah.
So I would like to get your take on this, because for me, you're a trans person who is a grown adult, has gone through puberty. So everything's healthy. Your sperm developed the way they needed to. You could reproduce. You could do all these things. And then what we do understand from clinical research is that a lot of the dysphoria, clinically, historically, is solved through puberty. And so let's say the stats go anywhere from 70 to 80%, where if someone is feeling gender dysphoric as a teenager or even younger now, then a lot of that is resolved through puberty because of the brain chemistry that is altered during puberty. Now, again, these are just studies. I don't know enough to be adamant about any of this. So the adult trans stuff to me is pretty easy. It's like, let's get trans rights for trans people to make sure that they're not abused, that they're not harmed, that they have the same rights that they deserve as a human. All of those things are great. The stuff that I'm hearing from specifically feminist literature, second wave feminists. And for those who don't know, second wave feminists, these are the suffragists of the 70s and 80s who did everything they could to lobby for the delineation between female and male, specific to legislation, rights, equal pay, abortion, all of those big structures that we now have in place. And a lot of the trans ideology today trans women are women is a slogan, as an example, is one that a lot of the feminists push back on. Right.
Yeah.
So
I'm very familiar with them.
I'm sure you are. And so that, to me, those are the big questions. And I've kind of diverged there. But let's go back to the kids for a second.
Yeah.
How do you see, because I think you've mentioned this twice now, which is, this is also mentioned in all the literature, is the suicide ideation of trans people, trans children, being dead named, being shamed, being abused. It leads to depression and anxiety and obviously suicidal tendencies. What do you think, how best do we approach a child, a 7 or 8 year old who is now coming out and saying, "Mommy, Daddy, I feel like I'm..."
Right.
Yeah, I feel other. It doesn't matter which side. I feel other. What do you think needs to be shared from your perspective and from the trans community to let's just say, people that don't know this or haven't had any time to understand this?
Right. So the first thing is I want to take a step back,
sure,
and delineate between issues that are a part of a movement or a discussion in the public space versus what's going on in people's actual factual lives. Okay,
that'd be great.
Like
that'd be great.
When things are going on in the public sphere and you have like laws that are being passed, or someone's protesting something and hashtag this and hashtag that, and people are marching in the streets and things are going down in the public sphere, that is part of a movement. Okay, and I'm not discounting it at all. I'm not trying to minimize it. It's needed, obviously, because those movements are what end up unlocking people having the ability to live their personal lives in the way that they wish. A good example of that is the 14th Amendment, okay? And the 14th Amendment should be the only argument for Black Lives Matter that you ever need, because it was literally created to free slaves. But then after that, if you look at the history of the amendment, it ended up freeing so many other people. And so that's what Black Lives Matter is supposed to be saying, and should be saying right now, is that when our lives matter and the freedom and that we are afforded actually matters in the public sphere, it's been proven through our history that everyone else gets free. With the 14th Amendment being the most compelling argument for that, for queer rights, for gay rights, for women's rights, even for people who are handicapped, like the 14th Amendment all day. Okay. So, but now when we're thinking about like people's individual experience of being trans, being brown, whatever it is in this world, then I can only go back to my own personal experience. And so for that, I raised 4 kids. I'm raising 4, they're not kids anymore. I have a 26-year-old, a 23-year-old, a 22-year-old that's about to be 23 in a couple of days, and a 15-year-old that's about to be 16. I can only think about what I would do for them. And it would be a series of, it wouldn't be just like, okay, here's what I would do. I have it, written down these steps and I can pass it off to you. But I would have to really see what's going on with my kid and really understand, like, why are they saying this? How is it being said? What is their health like? How is it going to impact our family in this moment if they start, taking hormones or any of these things? I mean, this idea of like trying on different clothes and expressing themselves in different ways, that to me is like a no-brainer. Like, yes, all day. Like, try on all the heels you want, all the dresses you want, play with like any toy that you want. I truly believe fabric does not have a gender attached to it by itself. We do that, okay? So all day, like, play with any toy you want to, express yourself any way you want to, all day. The hormones and the medical procedures, that I would take some time to like really think through thoroughly for my child. And that to me is the right of any parent or family to think through that for their child. there shouldn't be any law restricting them to think through that for their child, unless they're in some way endangering the child's life, which I don't think that it would, unless it's some extreme case. I don't know enough about the science there to understand if it would endanger the child's life. Now, is it a decision that the child is able to make? That depends on the child. There are some children that are freaking incredibly, tuned in. They're like what they call these old souls. They know what they want, and they are going to tell you exactly. And they're very articulate. I've met these children before. They're just, they're on it. And there's other children that, are not. And it just depends, honestly. I don't know. It's not really, I don't know.
No, it's great. I mean, because I think I like the answer because it's nuanced and it depends on every individual situation. And I think a lot of the macro discussions have to do with, does the government have any right to say anything about what a parent does? And if a parent goes to a clinic like the Genesis Clinic in Dallas, Texas, as an example, and they want to bring their child to that clinic where they want to start that child on cross-sex hormones or puberty blockers or any of that, that's up to the parent and that's up to the child. Right. And so that's really the big discussion. And I referenced that because I listened to the Daily this morning. And coincidentally, they were talking about, this is Trans Discussions Part 1, and they talked about this young family. Her name was Holly, and she was a lesbian who was married. They got divorced, but her twin daughters, one of them decided that she was trans, and they couldn't figure out why she was so depressed for years. She'd go lock herself up in her bedroom, and she would cry all the time, and she didn't know what was going on. And finally, they took her to Genesis, this clinic in Dallas, Texas. And they sat her down. A clinical psychologist talked to her for 3 or 4 hours and said, or him, excuse me. She goes by him now. Mm-hmm. And he explained everything that he felt and that he wanted to be. He was always a tomboy, but he was like, I am, this is how I identify. I am a he, him, and I want to be this. And I didn't really understand this until I recently went online and found out that there's other people like me, and I felt less alone for the first time in my life. And so Grayson is this child's name, and he is now on testosterone, and he is very, very happy, according to this. Again, I just listened to it this morning. And his mom, who is lesbian, said that when she came out to her parents, and this is many years ago, because Holly, the mother, is 62 years old. And she said it wasn't well received, that her parents were not happy about this, and that it made her feel worse. And so obviously she wanted to be very supportive to her child and whatever makes her child happy. And she was very worried because the child was drawing very disturbing pictures, one of which called himself an imposter, and he didn't feel like, he didn't know who he was. And now he does. He feels good about himself, and he's 17. I think he's almost 18, and he's already on medication. And that was, for me, a compelling story for a lot of reasons. One of which, it was someone who had come out in her own right as a lesbian, so understood how difficult that is. And so embraced that with her child and loved him and immediately supported him. He said, hey, we're going to figure this out. Much to what you said. Let's go talk.
Right.
Let's find out what the options are. Let's see how this all works out. And I don't know what's going to happen next with this young family, but it was a touching story. Tomorrow, they're actually talking about the GOP mandates across most red states that are attempting to outlaw these clinics and or penalize these parents for something they're calling child abuse, which is a very, very strong accusation. And my brother, who's an attorney, said that, that's just bad faith in general. You can't say that because it's not accurate and we have no idea what it is. To your point also, we don't know, we have no longitudinal studies on a lot of these things. Right. So the hormonal blockers, and I learned a little bit about this, so I'll share it with you, is that it's the drug of choice here in the United States. It's called Luprin. And it's historically used for something called precocious puberty, which is when a 5-year-old, and most of the times it's female, where a little girl is starting to go through puberty at 5 or 6, and she's starting to be sexual, and obviously that's a problem. So these hormonal blockers actually delay puberty in that child until 9 or 8 or 9 or 10 or whenever they actually remove the hormonal blockers. And there's not a lot of data on what those hormonal blockers do to bone density and things like that as far as your growth.
Right.
So they don't know. What they do know is that they're very strong medications because they're also used for cancer and prostate and breast cancer for men and women. And that's what the FDA approval is about. So a lot of what you're seeing on the right is that these drugs, these puberty blockers themselves are deleterious to the long-term health of the children. Right. And then they have something they call a cascade of intervention, which means that if you start a child on this path, letting them identify as the other at as early as 6 or 7,
right,
that they will then almost not 100%, it's like 90-some% if they're on these puberty blockers and they're identifying as this other and they're very happy in that life, they're terrified of puberty. Either way, right? Because once puberty happens, specifically male, as you know, as a male, biologically, you know that in your voice and your body, and I mean, you're very strong and you're very fit and all of that. So that's something you know. Right. And so that's a big piece of the discussion is where does this intervention come in and should the government be involved? And, that's to me where we're fighting over all of these things when we don't really have any data and it's now just emotion and everyone's, grabbing their tribe and saying, hey, I'm going to blah, 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 blah. And that's why we wanted to study this as an organization, T30 being the organization. We're just trying to figure out there has to be a much more empathetic and compassionate way to have these discussions. And we need to kind of just sit back and tuck our opinions away for a bit until we understand a little bit more and we can do some homework on these things. And that's why, to me, it's a fascinating piece to talk with you, because you are, as an adult, living your life the way you want to live it for the first time in your life. And you went through terrible mental trauma just recently because of it. And so that's a big piece of it too, as far as the gender piece is like, why so much turmoil and why so much judgment based on, like you said, fashion, right? I mean, that's the biggest piece for you is that you want to express yourself differently. It doesn't even have to do with your sex, right? It doesn't. So, the next.
It's really pretty. Well, first of all, I want to say that it's heartbreaking to know that that there's so many families struggling with this and that there's people trying to step in and do, get in their tribal corners and this kind of thing in order to legislate what people can and can't do. Here's what I have to say about that is that obviously, did my camera just go off?
Yep.
Okay, hold on a second. My camera's doing this thing where it goes off sometimes. I don't know.
It's you fancy developers with your cool webcams. Yeah. I'm just using my computer.
Okay, let's try to bring it back. Is the battery okay? The battery's fine. Okay. I think it just times out.
There you go.
Okay.
That's okay.
So rather than judge whether something should be done by the results that you anticipate that will be at the end, I usually try to, because that's kind of like, okay, well, is this going to be a perfect situation for a child? Will the child be harmed in any way? What about this scenario, that scenario, this edge case, and that edge case? The child is happy now, but what happens when they're 14 and so we're trying to do this calculation of whether or not it's going to be all good in the end to make the judgment call of whether or not it's the right thing to do. And that's one way of going about it. And I'm not saying that it's completely invalid because we do that all the time. We judge things in order to analyze what the outcome is going to be and so that we can make an ethical choice. Yeah, that's one way of looking at ethics. Another way of looking at it is, what's the intent? Does the intent come out of and rooted in true love, like agape love, not like eros or all these other things, but agape love, like the actual love for humankind? And I think for me, as you said, all this came to me a lot older, the first time I experienced gender euphoria, because I experienced so much of the dysphoria, right, of not feeling like the right expression, but the gender euphoria was the thing that made me feel, okay, this right here is good shit.
Right.
This, I feel powerful. I feel seen. I feel beautiful. I feel like myself. Like that gender euphoria is more important to me than talking about the dysphoria. Because once we have that euphoria, I might be able to deal with a lot of dysphoria if I have a little piece of the euphoria. Because, you know, there's not much you can tell me when I put on my heels and like walk into a place. It's like a whole different person, really, honestly.
Right.
And it is just an experience I don't think a lot of people have because they're so trapped in the prison of who they're supposed to be. Even a lot of women who, you know, are competing with, you know, the Kardashians, or whoever online to, you know, look like a certain body image or whatever it is. And when they free themselves from that, and they're able to experience the euphoria of being themselves, it is very, very freeing. So if you can do that for a child, and whether, I mean, in my personal parental experience, if I would try to delay the drugs as much as possible, if they can get that from other things other than drugs, then that'd be great.
Yeah,
drugs
I would too.
The only way, then, you know, that's for a parent to make a decision for their child, obviously.
Yeah. So and I agree with that. I would say I have two little boys, 8 and 10, and they're, you know, both happy, healthy kids. And as of right now, you know, they are boys, right? So I don't have to worry about that discussion. So it's really easy for me to make a judgment.
Yeah.
But as the more I read, the more I think my compassion grows. And then as I read specifically the clinicians and the medical doctors that think this is wrong, you know, that's also very powerful to read because they're doing that. These are clinicians. These are people that went to school for 12 years and they're saying, hey, there's bone density problems. There's sterility issues. There's all these big things that take place and no one's talking about it. And you know what? We got to figure this out. And I think that's really where, as a group, we do need to stop and pause and figure this out without the venom, you know. And then another thing that it bleeds into this category, and I'm very adamant about this, so I'm curious to see how you think about it. Okay. I've done a lot of homework on it, and as a former athlete, I have huge issues with it. What do you think of trans females competing with natal females?
Right. No, yeah.
You have an opinion there?
I've seen this all over my feed.
It's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Okay. So I was big into sports when I was like a kid. And then when I got into high school, I was like, I'm done with this because you guys are a little too rough for me. And I don't want to fight all the time. And you guys are having fun fighting. This is where the break with the male.
The gender.
Yep. Male gender. Like I was like, okay.
Macho bullshit.
I want to play soccer. Like you go fight. I'll be a arts and theater kid. How about that? My theory of it, and I haven't spent a lot of time thinking through it, is like, why not just make it based on height and weight? Honestly, like when I wrestled my freshman year in high school, which was a terrible idea because I'm so tall, right? And here I am, 150 pounds, you know, 5'9", wrestling against some, you know, 5'2" guy that's like this. And he kicks my ass because you know, he's so strong, right? And I'm just like this little beanpole of a kid. And I was like, yeah, well, I'm 150 pounds, but he's like, you know, he's short. So of course he's gonna kick my ass. And so I think that my theory is that if you match people up with height and weight, then what's gonna be the difference? Because obviously they're athletes. Maybe the muscle mass might be different. I don't know, but that's my theory is that it shouldn't be gendered. And maybe it's just height and weight. Maybe that will do it. What do you think?
Okay. Well, I've done a lot of homework on this. And so here's some statistics that are relevant. So after male puberty, and this is the issue, I don't have any issues with a trans man competing in male sports at all. So if any female who's transitioned to male wants to compete, you're welcome. Knock yourself out. All good. if you've gone through male puberty, what takes place, and there's a great book, should you want to look at this, it's called T. And it's the hormone that divides and dominates us. Yeah, by Carol Hooven. And she's an evolutionary biologist at Harvard. And her and other evolutionary biologists I've studied all agree on this. There's 4 major things that happen with natal testosterone. So when you're born and you are a small gamete, little boy, you have testosterone that flows through you in natal. You have testosterone that flows through you 2 months after birth, somewhere between 20 times that of a female. Puberty, same thing, 20 to 30 times as much testosterone that affects you. And what that does, and then you have one more little punch before your 21st birthday. And so what that does is that it actually affects the bone density, your fast twitch muscle. Men on average, these are on average, have 65% more muscle in their lower body. They have 95% more muscle in their upper body. They have larger lung capacity, larger heart, and they have more issues specific to sports, larger hands, larger feet, right? All of that. Your camera just changed. I don't know if you knew that.
I know. The camera got too hot.
Okay.
What happened to it? Yeah.
Oh, that's fine. So that is the homework. That's the homework I've done. And again, I've done a lot more, but that's this big issue with Leah Thomas, right? For University of Pennsylvania. She's the big swimmer who's done, she's won a couple different championships lately. And that's where the hoopla is. And again, the mean-spirited stuff I don't like. I don't like that someone makes fun of her and dead names her and makes her feel terrible about herself. That's not, to me, helpful in any way. But the issue specifically, and this is just a liberal lens, I'm not sure where you lean on the political front, but I lean liberal, and my liberal brother, and we look through things through 2 lenses usually. One is fair and harm. And so is it fair and is it causing harm? Right. And the idea there, specific to female sports, is that it does cause harm, specifically in collision sports. So there was a wonderful study, Helen Joyce wrote about this in her book, and it dealt with the Australian Soccer Foundation, Australian Rugby. And in rugby in the UK, the governance specific to doctors, clinicians, referees, they are all on the hook financially and liable for injuries to the athletes. So they conducted a study, most of which was done by female clinicians and athletes. And they came to the conclusion that it's just not fair to have a trans female play rugby against natal females, because the words they used was fold them like a deck chair. So one of the actual athletes at the time.
But I ask you, is the height and weight like out of line?
That's a good point, because the person that they actually addressed she was 6'2" and 220 pounds.
Right.
So she was
other players were probably shorter and less weight.
Well, yes. And that's the big part. So I agree with you on it's possible, but the issue isn't just the height and the weight. It's
bone density,
how fast we are. It's everything. Because I fought in martial arts for years. I don't know if you remember that, but the idea there was that we never fought against women. It was never a discussion. And I don't know if you watched the UFC, but in UFC, they had a female named Fallon Fox who was a trans female. And she came in and actually hurt her opponent to the point where she broke her orbital eye socket. And the woman after the fight said, I've never felt that overpowered in my life. I've never been unable to remove myself from a hold. I've never been hit that hard. I don't know if it's because she found out that she was trans or not. But these are the kind of examples for me that there's 2 separate problems, right? I think that, as I already shared, with the trans stuff, to me is not an issue. I think we need to support and legislate to make sure that trans people are protected and loved and cared for. And then on the other side of it, and this is where the culture gets involved, is trans females and then they get cruel and mean spirited with the words. That's not what I'm trying to get to. I'm just trying to say there's got to be, and this is the point of, why I'm having these discussions with people that I respect and read about, is that we have to step back off of our soapboxes as a group and start to look at things and understand where they sit, and that those are the kind of things.
Conversations like this. This is a nuanced thing. It's not a tribal. It shouldn't be a tribal thing. It's like, we talk about height and weight and bone density and crushing people's skulls in collision sports versus non-collision sports. Like maybe there are some sports where height and weight work. Right. Maybe there's some like the collision sports where we're actually hitting each other and bone density that plays a part. Like, both sides have to really think through these things and, get.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So let me ask you this then on the gender side, because I think that gender has, in all the research I've done, and most of the people I talk to outside of the zealots on one side, is that gender is fluid. I don't think a lot of people have an issue with that, right? It's like, they're like,
actually is too. Research that. There are lots in nature, gender is fluid.
Yes.
There's lots of animals that, especially the older ones, the ones that are more closer to the original versions of animals that existed, that changed their gender throughout their lifetime.
Okay, I'll have to research that. Do you have any examples?
Fish.
Like the clownfish? Yes, the clownfish I've read about.
A lot of different fish actually changed their gender throughout their lifetime.
Okay.
And there's a really good podcast on it by PBS. It's called Gonads. Sorry.
Gonads. No, that's good. I'll check it out.
I'll send it to you afterwards. But it talks about how gender fluidity is very normal in nature.
Okay.
Very
and I don't. So let me ask you this. So I was watching a really cool documentary about Rwanda and how after the genocide in 1984, they lost 800,000, mostly men, from their country. And so the women had to step up and they had to move into positions of, police and military and parliament and medicine and all of these pieces. And that country, because of this horrible disaster, is now the number one country in the world specific to females representing the country. 61% of parliament is female.
Wow.
And they redrafted the Constitution. And in the Constitution itself, and it actually uses words, it's called the Gender Development Program. And so they use the word gender to make sure that gender equality remains where it is within the country because they're seeing that it works. Iceland is doing this as well. And so that's a question for you on the more of the functional side, because I agree with gender is fluid, but what about terminology? And what about categorization? Like, what does that look like? Because if in the Constitution itself says gender equality will be enforced based on Parliament, and Parliament is using gender equality in the sense of the binary, right? The female and male. And so if that's the case, if the fluidity then, which again, I agree with you, and every young person I talk to, specifically high school and college, they don't even consider gender an issue anymore.
Right,
most of them identify as non-binary,
right?
And it has nothing to do with sex. They're just like, nah, you know what? We're done with this crap. So that said, what does that look like for you because you're a businessman, or business person, you know what this looks like, right? What does that mean if we remove the word, what do we replace it with?
The thing is, what's happening is they're solving problems for the challenges that they had, and they're in power, so that they're using the laws and writing is their constitution. And then the young people are like, well, that's not even a problem for me. So this law that you've written, thanks, but great. Like gender's not even a problem anymore. It's like it's like someone walking into the ER, with a scrape on their leg, and then they're like, okay, well, we're going to amputate your leg. Well, okay, well, the scrape doesn't matter anymore because the leg's gone. So, I mean, it's kind of extreme. I don't know why my mind goes to that. But yeah, so a lot of these problems that are part of, the struggle for gender equality and all of this stuff, it might be very valid right now, but me and you have this conversation hopefully and make sure that we're still alive in 10 years. And I'll be alive. Are you gonna be alive in 10 years? Yes.
I hope so.
Okay.
I got 2 little kids.
Right. Okay. So let's have this conversation in 10 years because in 10 years, a lot can happen.
Oh my God, right? Yes.
I mean, I think that it might not be it might be an issue, but it might not be the same issue. And so the laws that you're writing now and writings of the Constitution might have meaning right now. And I don't want to dismiss that at all, but who knows? Because listen, the people that were sitting at lunch counters and being spit on, in Dr. King's day and the civil rights movement, okay? Mm-hmm. Those people survived that, and they had a story to tell, and but it also shaped the way they saw the world, okay? But not only the people that were sitting at the lunch counter, but the people who were actually spitting on them had a worldview as well. And those people ended up being the doctors and the lawyers and the high school principals and the assembly people, okay? And we forget that. Those people that were not wanting integration, and they didn't just disappear. They still ran those cities, right?
Yep.
But eventually they will not be there anymore. And maybe their children are not reborn liberals, but maybe they won't be as volatile to the point of wanting to lynch people and, spit on them when they're walking down the street. So eventually we hope that we're evolving towards a place where we love one another, where, as Dr. King says, it's you can make laws to restrain the heartless, but you can't ever make a law to make someone love another person. And also, I believe it was, Jesus that said that, they came to him and said, what's the most important law of Moses? And says, the most important law was, to love your neighbor as yourself. Love is the most important law. All of those 10 commandments, if you think back on them, if you actually love the other person, you won't do these things to them. So it's not about creating laws, more and more laws to restrain people, because you can only restrain people so much. It's about creating a culture that actually engenders and cultivates love for another person, no matter what they look like, no matter anything. And once you have that, then do you really need more and more laws?
No. So you're right. So and I would just say that's a hope for vision of our culture, right? So my question is at a pragmatic level, because I am cool with the gender fluidity thing. I have absolutely zero energy around it. I think it's great. Specifically, the young people I'm talking to agree. Yeah. My question is, what word do we replace it with? Because this is where, again, I've spent a lot of time with feminists and that literature over the last 6 months. They spent decades lobbying for this delineation so that females could experience a life equal to the patriarchy. That's the piece. So if we remove genders and we remove consensus data, and we have people that now are non-binary on passports and census data and employment data, all of this, that's real shit. So what does that look like? How do we make sure that we're not discriminating against anyone, whether it's female or trans or binary folks, but the categorization, the naming structures. This as a developer. I mean, how important are naming structures, right? So what does that look like? That's my question to you, because you're obviously a highly educated, intelligent person. That's, for me, where the right has some very valid objections. Not specifically the stuff that they're going at as far as the religious, God said you can't be gay, that's all nonsense. But when they say things like, hey, how do we categorize things? How do we use census data? How do we make sure we don't have trans females in female prisons harming actual natal females, right? Those are big discussions that I'm seeing go back and forth. And that's why I use the Rwanda example, because I just happened to be watching it over the weekend, and the terminology is there, right? It's not just America that's dealing with this. So that was my question to you as an intellectual. What does that look like? How do we categorize the differences between males and females for the protection of females? Because men are not a problem, right?
I hear what you're saying. So here's another example of where I think people get caught up in the weeds of the details of what the result's going to be, and then after a while, then the intention is gone. Okay. So if the intention is to protect every single human being, And for right now, if the categories make sense, to make sure that we say man, woman, trans, non-binary, we haven't created a perfect system that solves every problem, but we have created fairness for now and equity for now. And so when it needs to evolve, let's be open to it evolving more. Maybe it evolves to a point where you don't need those terms anymore. Maybe it doesn't. But fighting over what the result's going to be while someone over here is actually suffering, you know, to me, that comes out of an intent of wanting to be right and not out of love.
Oh, no question. And I agree with you 100% on the love quotient there, because I think that if you lead with love, everything's easy.
Right. You'll find an answer that actually makes sense for now. And I think that's the other thing. I'm a big fan of Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now and all of that.
I love him.
And a lot of the problems that we end up experiencing are because we're projecting too far into the future. So what makes sense right now for those communities? Does it make sense? Maybe it does make sense to say the word gender and to use man, woman in Rwanda for right now. And, you know, not saying that we shut out the trans community or non-binary community, but for right now in their community, this is what makes sense for them.
Well, I agree. And that's actually where I think that the separate legislation has to take place to protect trans people. Right. That's my thing. And I don't think we can lump everyone in together. It's too vague.
No.
And so that for me is the big problem, is that and as you know, in advertising, we have reverence for words, right? I've spent my last 20 years selling ad campaigns, and the idea there is that words matter. And that's, for me, where I'm trying to figure out what's the replacement, because I'm cool on the gender side. Those are the kind of things that, you know, we're trying to report on and trying to understand better. And, you know, T30's mission is to have people understand one another without agreement.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Agreement's not that important to me. I think if you really understand someone else, you don't have to agree. You can still hug it out and say, all right, that's good. I love you. I appreciate you. I don't agree, but we're good. I don't think you're a bad person. I don't think you should die. I mean, that's basically what's happening in our society. If you're wearing a red hat, you should die. And if you voted for Joe Biden, you should die. And you're like, come on, guys, let's get away from that. And that's the problem that we're seeing specifically with, and I would say this too, the mob in any category, whether it's liberal, trans, gay, bisexual, the mob is a bigger problem than the actual individual.
Oh, right.
Right? I mean, I've never had a discussion with a trans person that got cantankerous or weird individually. Just me sitting down and talking just like this. It's never happened. But when I watch stuff on, you know, trans stuff, and you see trans people standing up on desks at the school, spitting on the teacher or the person talking because they don't agree that trans females are women. You're like, okay, you guys aren't helping yourself in the trans community by doing that. And anyone on the other side that say trans isn't a real thing, you're not helping anybody either. You're just being mean, right? So it's like somewhere in between that's where we have to just separate the wheat from the chaff, if you will. And the individual discussions seem to be the most pronounced and the most productive. And that's why I wanted to bring you on the show today, B, because I've always respected you as a developer and a human being. And I saw how happy you were. And again, I didn't know all this, the terrible trauma you went through. So I'm glad you made it. I'm glad you're still here with us.
There's a pretty story behind there.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's tragic, but you know, the good news is you came out on the other side, and you do beam happy. That's what the pictures look like to me, is that you are and have found yourself, and you're expressing yourself in the way you want to now. And I wish you as much luck as anyone could have, because you're a very good human being. And I want you to live with as much love as you possibly can with your family and your friends and your new community. And thank you so much for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Joey. It's good to see a friend that I knew from a long time ago.
Yeah.
You keep on evolving. So, you know, hats off to you as well, because, you know, people don't have to evolve. You could have been in the same spot that you were, 16 years ago. And I think you are an example of cisgender straight white male that that is serious about becoming living outside of the box that you probably could have lived in for the rest of your life pretty comfortably.
Yeah.
Probably it would have been a lot of personal pain, but everyone else would have thought you were having the time of your life. And so I think that your courage, if there were more people like you that had courage to evolve themselves and to be open to other ideas and be open to other people and to go out there looking for answers to questions, then it's not just about people like me having their freedom. I mean, yeah, I need my freedom. I need my freedom, but it's about people of all different walks of life, including you, finding themselves and understanding who they are. Because, when I look at the suicide rates, actually the highest suicide rate out there is among white males, white cisgender males, mostly straight, kill themselves at a higher rate than anyone else. There's a lot of pain there.
Yeah.
And I think that I'm not trying to say that, they don't enjoy privilege, but there's a lot of pain behind in their lives that is unaddressed. And a lot of times they don't have to address it because they have so much power.
Right.
That doesn't mean the pain still isn't there. And I think you probably are a person that understands that better than anyone.
Well, thanks, dude. I appreciate it. And again, we will stay in touch. We won't lose touch for 16 years again. And
we have a date 10 years from now to talk about one particular thing. I'm not sure how to put that on my calendar, but we'll find a way.